Hello class, this is your electricity notes or energy notes for the upcoming video on energy. And I wanted to do these notes online for homework because I want to have lots of time in class for you guys to make your movies. So feel free to use this video. You can pause it at any time if you need to pause to write down your notes. And if you do have any questions, just write those down also, and feel free to ask me when we get back to class tomorrow. So here it goes. The first thing I want to do is start with some general vocab that you need to know. So renewable energy is something we're going to be talking about for the rest of the year. And that is energy that comes from a source that can continuously regenerate. And so that's some fancy words, but all that really means is that it's energy that can come back or won't be depleted in our lifetime. So that's things like solar power, wind power, and anything else that once it's used up, it still comes back, right? You can't use up the sun, at least not in our lifetime, not in the next couple of million years. So that would be a renewable energy source. On the other hand, there's a non-renewable energy. Non-renewable energy means energy that does not come back. Once we've used it, it's gone, at least for the next million years, and won't be coming back quickly. So my official definition is energy that comes from sources that do not regenerate, or at least not quickly enough to be reused in our lifetime. So things like that would be examples of like coal or oil, things that once we extract them from the ground, it takes millions of years for them to recover. And so they're considered non-renewable because they won't be coming back anytime soon. So for the next quiz, you're going to need to know just some very basic information about each type of energy source, and then we'll go more in depth later. So for just each one, just write down some notes about what it is. So first of all, solar energy is energy or electricity that we can harness from the sun. So if you see the picture in the top right, that's a guy working on some solar panels. So those panels absorb the sun's heat and light energy and can convert that into electricity that we can use for our homes. Next would be windmills or wind energy. And that's, if you see the picture in the bottom left, that's a wind farm, which we have in California. And when the wind blows, it turns those turbines, and that creates electricity that, again, can then be used in our homes. Another energy source we have is oil. So on the bottom right, you can see an oil drill. And what they're doing is drilling into the earth. And when they strike oil, they'll pump oil up from underneath the ground. And we get energy from oil by burning it. And so when we burn oil, it will then power generators that create electricity. And then a byproduct of that is that we produce some pollutants when we do that, because anytime you burn something, pollution is released into the atmosphere. So oil is what we call a fossil fuel, and we'll talk more about that later. But basically what it means, it's a fuel that comes from decaying organisms. So if something breaks down underground and it's been dead and breaking down for millions of years, eventually it'll turn into a fossil fuel such as oil. So that's why we consider oil like a non-renewable energy source, because it's not going to come back for the next million years. It takes many, many, many years in order to get something broken down to the point where it returns to oil. The next energy source we have is natural gas. So the picture at the very top shows how they extract natural gas. And this process is called fracking. And what they're doing is they're pumping pressured water down into the earth to get into the cracks of the earth. And when they do that, that releases gas that has been built up over millions of years. So natural gas, like oil, is a fossil fuel. And it's produced from organisms decaying over millions of years. And when those organisms decay, they let off gas, and that gas gets trapped underneath the earth. And so we can use fracking, like the picture shows above, to release that gas, and we can harness it and then again burn it, and which releases some pollutants, but also is a really efficient energy source. Then on the middle right, you can see a picture of a hydroelectric plant. So hydro means water. So this is getting energy from running water. And what we do at the hydroelectric plants, what you can see there is they've built a dam, and that dam is holding back some water that's trying to flow into the river below. And they will just let out a little water at a time, and when they let water flow through the dam, that water turns a wheel, and the wheel then creates electricity and can power anything. The next energy source is coal. And coal is another fossil fuel, so when decaying organisms break down over millions of years, they could form coal. And this is, you can think of it like the coal you'd put in your barbecue pit, like charcoal. So it's something we burn, and as it burns, it releases heat, and that heat can be used to make electricity. And we do this on a very large scale. So coal is where most of our electricity comes from in Hayward, and where most of our electricity comes from in the United States. The next energy source is called geothermal. That's a fancy word, but what I remember is geo stands for rocks, and thermal means heat. And so this is literally taking the heat from the earth or from rocks and turning that into energy. So we know that, the Earth's rocks are consistently moving. That's why there are sometimes earthquakes. So we can actually take the movement of those rocks and take the heat from that movement and turn that into a source of energy. So not much is known about geothermal right now, but it is a source that's being explored more. Biomass or biofuel is again a word you might not have heard of, but remember bio means life. And so biomass or biofuel is energy that's coming from life or from living matter. So what they'll do is, as you can see in the middle right picture, they'll take fields of corn or soy, and then we can take those plants when they're dead and we can burn them and get energy. You can also use, things like vegetable oil is how some cars are powered, and that would be a biofuel because vegetable oil comes from vegetables. And so it is considered a renewable energy source because those plants can be replanted, right? We could run out of plants, but we could plant more, and so it is considered a renewable energy source. Then finally there's nuclear power, which we're going to talk about a lot later. So all you need to know right now is that nuclear power comes from the splitting of uranium atoms, specifically their nucleus. So nuclear power is from the splitting of the nuclei. And so the biggest thing you need to know is that it's a chemical reaction. And it's a power source that's kind of confusing. So uranium is mined from the earth, and it would take a long time for uranium to come back. So technically it's not renewable. But at the same time, uranium, there's so much of it that we won't run out of it in the near future, probably in the next million years. And so we do consider it renewable in some way just because there is so much that it'll regenerate in the amount of time that we would use it. Okay, now that we've talked a little bit about each one, I want you to take a good guess of, do you think each is renewable or non-renewable? So if you think each of these sources is renewable, put an R next to it. Or if you think the source is non-renewable, put an NR. So I'm going to give you some time right now to do that, and then we'll check your work. So go ahead. Okay, at this point, I'm going to move to the next slide, but if you're not done, I encourage you to pause the video right now so that you can continue writing your answers before I show you responses. Okay. So here are the correct responses. As you can see, the main non-renewable energy sources are oil, natural gas, and coal, because those are the ones that are fossil fuels. And so like I talked about, fossil fuels, it takes many, many, many years for them to come back, so they're considered non-renewable. All of the rest are renewable, right? We're never going to run out of the sun, at least not in the next million years. So it's not something that we consider non-renewable because it's always there. Same thing with the wind. The wind is constantly blowing. Even if it's like a day that doesn't have a lot of wind, it will come back the next day. So yeah, similarly, it is renewable. People get confused a lot about hydroelectric plants because, there is a water crisis, but we're running out of clean water. Actual just running water we have plenty of. There's lots of rivers. The ocean is huge. So water is not something that we're concerned about. So it is a renewable resource. It's just that clean water is hard to find. And then I want you to look at the graph on the right and just notice where most of our energy comes from. So most of our energy in the United States, as you can see on the pie chart, comes from petroleum, which is oil, coal, and natural gas. Which, if you look back to your notes, those are the 3 fossil fuels, the 3 non-renewable resources. So I just want you to notice and understand that the biggest sources of our energy right now come from sources that could run out possibly in our lifetime. They think they could run out in the next 40 to 50 years. So that's why this is such a big deal. That's why you guys are learning this and trying to teach others about it. Because right now we're depending on sources that are finite. They could run out very quickly. So what are some problems associated with burning fossil fuels? Like we've been talking about, so this should just be a review at this point. First of all, they're non-renewable. All fossil fuels are considered non-renewable, and therefore we could run out within the next 40 to 50 years, which is, in your lifetime, we will have to be looking for something other than oil to fuel our cars. Second of all, they release greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, which contribute to global warming. So we're about to talk about greenhouse gases. You've probably heard something about them before, and we're going to get a little more clarity on what those are. But when people say, fossil fuels contribute to pollution, that's what they're talking about. Fossil fuels release pollution in the form of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Okay, so what is this thing, global warming and greenhouse gases? So I have here a drawing, and I'd like you to copy down some form of this drawing in your notes. On the left, the little yellow dot is supposed to be the sun, and in the center, the big blue dot is supposed to be the earth. I know that you know that the sun is much, much bigger than the earth, so this is just a drawing as if we were looking from the earth at the sun, in which case it looks pretty small, but you know that it's actually very big. Okay, so global warming happens when the sun's rays hit the earth. So the sun is constantly giving off heat and light, which we know because we live on Earth and we have felt it before. You felt that sunburn. So when the heat and light hit the Earth, it actually is going to bounce off. And, excuse me, the heat and light will bounce off the Earth's surface, and if the Earth had nothing else around it, say the Earth was like a hard rock like the moon or like Mars with no atmosphere, then that heat and light would just bounce right off the Earth, and we would not feel the effects of the sun. It would be very, very cold, like the moon, like Mars, and it would not be able to sustain life. We're talking at temperatures like 100 to 200 degrees below zero, and so it's just colder than we can imagine right now. So here's what global warming does. The gray circle now around the Earth are greenhouse gases, and that's in our atmosphere. So these greenhouse gases, you don't need to memorize them right now, but they include things like carbon dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, methane, and these greenhouse gases are going to protect our Earth. So now when the sun's rays shine onto the Earth, again, the rays are going to bounce off the Earth, but now what happens is the greenhouse gases actually act as a blanket. And so those rays go, they're trapped in this blanket layer, so they go back towards the Earth and can get absorbed, and then they might ricochet off again, but not much is going to escape. And so these greenhouse gases create a blanket around the Earth that keeps our temperatures nice and warm for human life, right? We couldn't survive at negative 200 degrees, so it keeps it more at like 70 degrees, which is completely comfortable for us. So I want you guys to think about, now that you know what global warming is, I'm not going to tell you the answer to this one, so I just want you to write in your notes, why do you think global warming is considered a good thing? So looking back at this diagram and looking back at your notes from what we just talked about, why is global warming a good thing, and why do we even depend on it? So I want you to think about that in your notes and write it down. We'll talk about it in class. And then next, I want to challenge you to think about, why is excess global warming a problem? So that's what everyone's interested in talking about right now, is the issues with global warming, even though, like we just said, global warming can be a good thing. So I have a video posted here, or you can go to my website and just click on the link for that video, and that tells you some of the problems. You're also just welcome to think about them, because I know you can use your heads and think about that. Okay, so that is the end of our PowerPoint for today. Please make sure your notes are complete. Go back through anything that was confusing. And if you have questions that can't be answered from this PowerPoint, please bring them to class tomorrow and we'll discuss them together. All right, I will look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Good night.